A Hairy Problem by Blue Bastard. Chapter 16 Extreme Inconvenience. The level of ecstasy Applejack felt as he went through our first forest run in weeks was impossible to describe. So he decided to take 2 weeks off from running after the incident with the dogs, not even trying to go running around the farm after nearly giving herself away the first time, just to be safe. The urge to run had been sated somewhat with an intense race with Rainbow Dash earlier in the week, but she couldn't fully feel the need for speed without the extra traction her paws gave her. The hunger to let loose, to indulge that wild side, was finally being met, and Applejack couldn't be happier. But there were other thoughts nagging her as she followed the old path from that first night back to Castle Everfree. During the race with Rainbow Dash, the desire Applejack had of winning was in conflict with another desire, one to keep looking at the plot of the Pegasus as she was racing. While the idea of wanting to stare at another mare's plot was uncomfortable enough, simply because Applejack didn't swing that way, it was why Rainbow's butt was so appealing that truly horrified Applejack. Rainbow had a very tasty-looking plot, with tasty being used to describe settings he actually wanted to eat, like food. Applejack ran harder, shaking her head to try and get the horrifying mental images out of her head. But the images of Rainbow Dash being bloodily cut up to be rendered into food just wouldn't leave. To try and make things slightly easier on her psyche, Applejack tried to think of Rainbow Dash being horribly mutated and turned into cupcakes. However, the idea was no less horrifying, and the result only generated another mental image of Pinkie Pie's alternate mood, where she was wearing parts of other ponies she murdered like some kind of sick dress. Worst of all, though, having now Applejack envisioned herself in the middle of all this. In her mind's eye, she could only see herself as the wolf she was now, with a few differences that truly made her look more canine than equine. Internally, however, Applejack was a much different pony, even if she could be called that anymore. Feral, uncontrollable, there was no trace of the farm pony in the beast rampaging on a bloody mission. Rainbow Dash had only been the first victim. The other element bearers soon found themselves viciously ripped apart by fangs and claws to feed the monster, neither pony nor wolf. It was then the rest of our family. Granny was easily dispatched, Big Mac soon after. Finally, all there was left in the mental nightmare was a wounded, bleeding Apple Bloom, caught in a corner and begging for Applejack's mercy. But this monstrosity only saw her sister as food, and with a sudden leap the corrupted element of honesty flew at the helpless filly. And in reality, Applejack slammed headfirst into a tree. It took a few moments to recover from the resulting daze, but otherwise she was unharmed physically. Mentally, however, AJ knew she was losing control of herself, of this werewolf thing. Surely her friends could help. Maybe Sakura could make some kind of potion that would lessen the urges. Yet at the same time, the feeling was inside her, the one that wanted to keep this werewolf thing a secret, and was protesting those ideas. "What am I going to do?" lamented the troubled lycanthrope as she sat on the forest ground, torn on what she was to do. She couldn't keep up the lying forever. Sooner or later, she'd make a mistake, and the whole town would fear her, the next monster to terrorize the town. But her friends would need to know. It was bad enough none of them knew while Sandalwood and Lyra, the two ponies she didn't interact with nearly as much, had forced the secret from her. There would be a time to spill the beans, that much was true. But there was no way to know when that time would come. Until then, Applejack would be a prisoner within her own body, fighting a losing struggle against the thing she was turning into. She felt it coming, but did nothing to stop it. Tilting her head toward the moon, she let out a weak "Aroo!" mirroring her own self-perception. It was so weak that nothing in the forest seemed to pay it any heed, as if it had never happened. Applejack was jealous of the Everfree. If there was anything it wanted to ignore, it could do so without problem. The same could not be said of the poor farmer, not when her problem influenced her fairy behavior. Except she had something the forest did not. She had the smartest of unicorn in all of Equestria for a best friend. "I gotta stop hiding this from my own friends," thought Applejack, mentally shouting down that other feeling that kept trying to tell her doing so was a bad idea. "It's only hurting every pony the longer I keep this under wraps. Tomorrow, the truth comes out." With her resolve boosted, she took off back to the farm, hopefully to get some sleep. If everything went to plan, it would be a long day ahead of her, but at least she wouldn't have to fight against her own element afterwards.
Hold on, please.
Fluttershy called out as he descended the steps. She could have simply glided down, but it was extremely early in the morning. Luna hadn't even lowered the moon yet, so the rudely awakened Pegasus wasn't going to risk crashing due to a groggy head. The fact remained, however, that some pony was banging on the door and had rudely awakened her. Now, the most confusing part of it all, though, was that she didn't know who could possibly be calling at this hour. Opening the door, she found a strangely hyper Twilight standing outside. A letter written on royal parchment floating in midair next to her, surrounded by the unicorn's purple magic aurora.
Oh, thank goodness you were awake, Fluttershy. I really need to apologize, but there's something going on I really need to help you with.
Before Fluttershy could ask for clarification, Spike, who also happened to be standing next to the out-of-character Twilight, provided it. Princess Celestia sent a letter asking for Twilight's help. According to the princess, there's an Ursa Meyer causing all problems all across the forest border near Philadelphia, and since Twilight dealt with the Ursa here at Ponyville, she felt it would be wise for her to handle the problem in Philly. But rather than across the monsters and some force before, sometimes I was hoping that you could come along and help me calm down, being that your special talents were crazy as well as small ones. Blurted Twilight, clearly not used to speaking in the same fashion as Pinkie Pie. Fortunately, Fluttershy had caught enough of the words to understand the situation.
Oh, of course he'll come. Darius has probably just distraught over something and can't find its mother. Just let me go pack some things, but for that,
Fluttershy brushed the ground with her hoof, nervously asking,
Are you alright, Twilight?
Well, yes, actually, I feel irritated. No less magical sensation. I don't have the most powerful alligator core or anything, but it means with my special sensation. Spike cut his adopted big sister off. Twilight wanted to try coffee so she could be awake this early, as she normally is during the light part of the day. Unfortunately, she tried to make the coffee herself, and I suspect she may have put one too many scoops of sugar into the mix. Scoops? Twilight asked, raising an eyebrow at her lifelong companion. The point is thinking about putting sugar into your coffee. That was only a comedy, and so it wasn't a lot of comedy, so it just made so you see bets of coffee over and over to increase the amount of caffeine, so it would be a zero taken. The princess never, obviously, I should see it. No! Spike facepalm, and Fluttershy just cringed. This was going to be a long trip of hyperactive Twilight. But then even longer once the energy rush died and made the unicorn into a sluggish mass of fur, horn, and limbs. Oh boy, I've been there. Your body's all drained, you can't move, then you find yourself speaking to your plushies a lot. Hidden in the woods, both out of sight and hearing, a dark figure overheard the conversation. He grinned, revealing his sharpened canines. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, to begin the more interactive part of his plan. With Celestia's favorite pupil and the weak-willed Pegasus out of the way, there was only one pony who could stop what was in store. Of course, that's exactly what he wanted. Taking care not to be noticed, the inquisitive presence made his way to the other side of Ponyville. This time, his destination was the Meary. Oh, how he wanted to partake in the succulent delights that no doubt resided within the kitchen. However, doing so would throw suspicion onto whatever disguise he was using, due to most ponies refusing to acknowledge the fact that meat was a perfectly good item on the menu. He was above having to scrounge to refuge for edibles. For materials to enable his plans, however, was a perfectly justifiable reason for dumpster diving, especially since the Meary was the only establishment for miles that would throw out the things he needed. It was harder than he thought. The tantalizing smell of all that meat just inside the back door to the kitchen almost made him go completely feral and just raid the place then and there. Only the promise of eventually being able to eat such meats to his heart's content through his current objective kept him focused. On the other hoof, it's exactly what he wanted, because he needed the best meat smells he could get if the plan was work. Once again, Lady Luck was on his side, as the things he sought were still fresh for the prep work. More than enough was available for his purposes. With his resources gathered, there was no time to lose as he bolted off into the night. He had a long way to go, longer still when factoring the return trip. But the end result was going to be so worth the hardship. The next morning.
Sweet Belle, you're gonna be late for school.
Rarity tapped her hoof impatiently. Normally, her little sister was better about being on time for school. But right now, the tiny unicorn had taken over the bathroom and had been working on something for a period of time much longer than she usually devoted to such things.
All right, I'm done.
Called back Squeaky Belle, the sound of her descent following close behind. Yet, the thing that came to a stop in front of Rarity, while looking like Squeaky Belle, did not look like Squeaky Belle at the same time.
Sweetie, have you been trying to use my hairstyling tools again?
Intoned Rarity. The answer was already obvious. While it was easy enough to see the younger sister had actually tried to replicate the big sister's hair curls on her own, inexperience and complete lack of knowledge on how to use said tools had turned Sweet Belle's mane into a stark parody of Rarity's hair, so hard that words simply do not exist to aptly describe what is sat atop of her head.
Yes?
Replied the offender, hoping that honesty would mean less trouble. Rarity just rolled her eyes as she magically summoned the abused tools from the upstairs water closet. Now back in the grip of their master, the devices made short work of restoring Sweetie's mane back to its usual large curls.
You know I've told you not to use these things, sister. They're not meant to be physically held in one's hooves.
Scolded Rarity.
Since we both know your magic hasn't yet manifested itself beyond the occasional spark or two, I suspect that's exactly what happened, isn't it? Yeah,
Sweetie despondently confirmed.
I was trying to make myself look more fashionable to show a diamond tiara. She's been going on and on about how her daddy got her a private hairstylist. It just won't shut up about it. Don't let her boast about how much better she is than you get under your fur, sweetie. Besides, she was one of the 3 fillies chosen to be in Philadelphia royal wedding. No. Does she have a big sister who happens to be an element bearer, and so is one of the most important ponies across the land? No. And does she always end up late for school? No. Well, that's what some ponies are going to be if they don't get going.
Teased Rarity as she nuzzled her smaller counterpart. Taking the hint, Sweetie just giggled before grabbing her saddlebag and heading out the door, and off to another day of adventure and learning and ignoring the biggest brat in the entire town. Rarity watched her sister leave the boutique, shaking her head in bewilderment at Sweetie's antics.
At least she was doing it for reasons other than trying to get her kitty mock and hairstyling again.
With Sweetie Belle out for the day, Rarity proceeded to get what she planned for today. Mostly it was just housekeeping and working on an order of fine tuxedo shirts for the Canterlot clientele. Now those plans changed when Pinkie Pie came over to visit Rarity, was hanging up some finished tuxedos that had just come out of the wash.
Hi, Rarity! Good afternoon to you too, Pinkie. What you doing? I was just getting these tuxedos out to dry. They're the first ones of the order that I need to fill from big name director over at Canterlot. He's doing some kind of musical, chorus line or something. That sounds productive,
Turns Pinkie, who really thought it actually sounded kind of boring, but it made for a great subject to change topic from.
At least more productive than what Twilight and Fluttershy are doing. Oh,
Rarity finished, putting up the last tuxedo on the line, and turned to focus her attention on Pinkie.
What are they up to today? Actually, they've been at it since last night, but considering how long it would take them to get to Philadelphia, I guess it would have already been past sunrise when they actually started doing what they want to do. Which was?
Questioned Rarity. A normal pony would have begun to lose their temper at Pinkie, but having known this excitable mare for too long, made Rarity understand that Pinkie would eventually get to her point.
From what I overheard from Gummy, it would seem Philadelphia is experiencing a major problem with an Ursa Meyer, and since Twilight dealt with the one Sniffs and Snails angered about a year ago, Princess Celestia requested she go as his filly. She also took along Fluttershy since he's really good with animals, and Twilight theorizes that the Ursa is just cranky, which Fluttershy is usually good at fixing.
I see, replied Fluttershy. Well, the idea that Gummy was a reputable source of information, much less a source at all, was ridiculous. Pinkie worked in ways that no pony would explain, and the only resolve for any pony dealing with her was to just go with it. Plus, as a close friend, Pinkie had no reason to try and fool Rarity with a story like that. Then, the fashionista remembered she had a planned project that Rose's absence worked out wonderfully for allowing.
Say, Pinkie, do you know when Twilight and Fluttershy will be returning? I don't know, why? Well, there's something I want to do for Fluttershy, but you have to keep it a secret, all right?
Pinkie nodded vigorously. Despite her free-spirited nature suggesting otherwise, she was definitely one who could be relied on being confident, even for such a small matter as this.
Well, I know Fluttershy could probably use a new light jacket, one with wing slits, for those silly mornings when she tends to her animals. So I was going to make one for her. However, it's a surprise, so you can't tell, all right? Okie dokie dokie, Piggy answered, motioning to indicate zipping her mouth. Lucky a key, digging a hole, burying the key in that hole, then building a house on top of that hole, and then moving on to that house. Right. Well, I best be going to work on those before those seals dry. I'll see you later then, Piggy. Rarity had trotted out into her house/workplace to begin work on her next generous gift. Pinky, however, did not leave her spot. The moment Rarity closed the door, the Pinky sense, patent pending, began giving the party pony horrific convulsions. Pinky knew what to mean. Stay right where you are. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, a much more distressed Rarity came out and looked like she was at a loss of what to do. Oh, Pinky, it's terrible! Lamented Rarity, totally not noticing Pinky had been standing outside her house for no discernible reason. I had this fabulous suit of burnt umber I wanted to use for Fluttershy's new jacket, but I don't have enough material, and there's no way to make it into the fabric warehouse in time to get more. Pinky, however, knew there was plenty of time. Rarity, Pinky said, sticking out her hoof, grab my hoof. Rarity looked quizzically at the extended hoof. Why would I want to do that, darling? Trust me on this, Rarity. Ding! Answered Pinky, winking. With nothing to lose, Rarity grabbed Pinky's hoof. All right, I've got your hoof. Now what is supposed to... The world seemed to glow bright all of a sudden, as if everything began to eradicate light brighter than the sun. Except it didn't instantly blind Rarity. Instead, it was as if everything was erased from existence, only for it to suddenly begin reforming in a split second. Supposed to happen? Rarity was shocked. Somehow, Pinky and Rarity were now standing in front of the local fabric warehouse on the other side of town, despite having been in front of Carousel Boutique but a second ago. The pale gray unicorn looked around to make sure that this wasn't an hallucination, that when it does happen, happened. Pinky, how did you... Sorry, Rarity, I can't tell you how I did that. I made a promise not to tell, preempted Pinky, giving a shrug of apology. All Rarity could do was shake her head in disbelief again. This was turning out to be very interesting, if not perplexing, day. If at that very moment one were to ask Pursuit how his day was going, he would answer, "What do you think?" So far, things had technically gone to plan. He had made the trip in record time, and of course his simple plan of luring the beast away with the bones had worked. But the lack of available information proved to be almost his downfall once again. He knew the creature was fast. He just didn't know how fast it was when not in its preferred form. The creature was also extremely tough. But while he could have taken it easy, that would have defeated the entire point of this misadventure. No, he had to lead it to Ponyville. After all the casing he had done in the settlement, he was sure the only way to defeat this creature was to have super equine abilities. And to his knowledge, only 2 such ponies living in Ponyville were himself and Applejack. Crashing of footfalls behind him prompted him to quicken the pace so he could keep that cretin behind him on his trail. Just over the horizon of the hill, he could see a familiar windmill just outside of town. A few more minutes running, and then he could ditch the bones, still smelling of meat, and run away. A boom and zoom technique he adapted for what he knew of Pegasus combat maneuvers. Some book he had read years ago. War Thunder or something stupid like that. It had been written in Lossad, and he'd never been really good at reading that language. But that was beside the point. All that mattered now was getting his charge to the town, and seeing if his split-second choice months ago had been the right one. It had taken some fiddling, but Rarity had managed to get all of her things through the front door of the fabric warehouse. In addition to a fresh bolt of burnt umber for Fluttershy's jacket, Rarity had seen to pick up some other things he had been meaning to restock on for the shop. In the end, she was hauling out an entire cartload of goods, all with her telekinesis. Following behind her was Pinky, reared up and carrying more of Rarity's goods. Are you sure that you need all this? Groaned Pinky, although just slightly, mostly out of humor. Well, not as strong as Applejack, Pinky still had that natural above-average strength all Earth ponies, and so wasn't having problems with the weight. You wouldn't believe how much fabric I had to use lately, Pinky dear, replied Rarity, who unwisely was beginning to behave as if she was just as haughty as a rich countess in Caroline. Why, just for the jacket I am making for you-know-who, I not only need a bolted front upper, but also a far here odds of... Out
of nowhere, a fast-moving, cream-colored blur barreled right into Rarity, knocking her down and causing her telekinesis to fail, which meant all of her stuff fell to the ground. The rear pony didn't seem affected. Still running, though, he had dropped a sack of something due to impact. Rarity instantly could smell something hard in the sack. But she had little time to react before the burnt upper roll came loose and covered both Rarity and the sack. Cerberus was tired, hungry, and angry. His three heads were all in agreement there had been something that smelled juicy and absolutely delicious. Something irresistible. Thus, it had journeyed a very long way from its home in search of that tantalizing meal. Now, as it finally caught up to the scent, it was like a dream come true. On the ground lay what was unmistakably a gigantic serving of baby back ribs. The burnt sienna color was unmistakably meat bathed in a delicious barbecue sauce. The bones sticking out were the only further confirmation that this was a perfectly sized slab of meat for the three-headed guard dog. Tyrek, meanwhile, is looking at that open gate, the unguarded door, and going, "Booyah! Well, I'm out. See you, fellas." It is currently on a rampage. Thank you, Sable Loam! Rarity, having just been knocked to the ground by some rude pony, then having all her goods tossed to the ground, wasn't having a good day. It would have been worse had Pinkie not quickly grabbed Rarity and dragged her just in time to avoid the crouching paw of Cerberus. "What?" cried Rarity, still trying to process the sudden turn of events.
"Don't worry, I got it,"
shouted Pinkie, who quickly stepped over to an inconspicuous hollow tree and began reaching up to it. However, a look of surprise and then frustration washed over the Earth Pony's face as he began to try digging hard into the tree.
"Pinkie, what are you doing? This is supposed to be one of my emergency ball stashes, but the ball isn't here. I know it's the yellow ball and the blue stripe with the red star." "Oh, well, I'm sure you did something with that, but now is not the time." "Oh, I remember. I gave that ball to a blue Dalmatian and a periwinkle cat some time ago. I guess I need to get a replacement, huh?"
Blue's Clues reference. Have I mentioned I love this book? Rarity just gave a nondescript, annoyed look at Pinkie.
"Yes, really. That's so important to remember something like that instead of trying to help me recover my things from not getting destroyed by that beast!"
To underline her point, she gestured to Cerberus, who had already scared off most of the town back into their homes, and now was apparently rummaging through the scattered fabric goods Rarity had bought.
Okay,"
replied Pinkie, oddly cheerful in a situation Rarity would classify as a complete disaster.
"I think I know how to fix this." "Oh, that's right, the hoof trick thing!"
exclaimed Rarity, now glad that her sugar-blooded friend worked in ways beyond explanation. She stuck out a hoof, expecting Rarity to take it. Instead, Pinkie just looked confused.
"What do you want me to do exactly?" "The thing you did, when somehow you took me and you from my house to the warehouse. Can't you do it now?" "Oh yeah, that, I could, but it doesn't work on non-living things such as your fabrics. Because then I could possibly go invade the private property of other ponies like banks and museums where I could steal things and become rich off of ill-gotten goods that don't belong to me."
Rarity rolled her eyes at this. Of course Pinkie wouldn't be able to save her things. And just when this day had been looking so good.
"But there's possibly another way," said Pinkie,
determination setting in on her face.
"Can you use your magic to hold all of the things?" "Well, yes, but that would take a lot of concentration, and I wouldn't be able to walk more than a snail's pace. What good would that do?" "Speed isn't the problem, believe me on that. What I need you to do is sit on my back." "You want me to what?"
Rarity was aghast. The only reason ponies would ride another's pony bareback is that there was no other option of transporting a pony for a number of reasons, such as leg injury or being infants.
"We don't have time for this!"
carried Pinkie, throwing Rarity's own concern over the fabrics being destroyed a few feet from her.
"Oh, all right,"
conceded Rarity, who proceeded to climb onto Pinkie's back. It was a very strange sight. A light gray, purple-maned unicorn sitting on the back of a pink-colored equine form. It was like something out of children's entertainment for the level of silly it had.
"Good! Now pick up all your stuff!"
Rarity did so, the remains of her shopping trip glowing in a blue aurora, rising off the ground, much to the confusion of Cerberus, The strange heads just looked around, trying to understand what had just happened. Unfortunately, Rarity's mental maneuvering of the burnt sienna cloth back into a rolled-up ball was hurried, and so the sack of meat-smelling bones got rolled up inside.
Now, hold on!
Announced Pinky suddenly. Rarity was about to ask why, but then felt herself hug Pinky's neck tightly as the world suddenly started moving around her at a very fast pace. Pinky, not being the competitive type generally, didn't demonstrate her natural endurance, which, while not allowing speeds on the level of Applejack or Rainbow, did let her run at a very fast clip with a heavy load on her back, namely one very shocked unicorn. Severus, however, noted the smell of meat moving away and proceeded to barrel down the streets after it. Having been denied his meat, he was really pissed off, and some pony was going to pay. The chase lasted only maybe 3 minutes, but to Rarity it was like an eternity. The beast was almost upon the two when Pinky suddenly made a sliding motion and managed to slip right inside the front door of Carousel Boutique, Rarity and her garment materials in tow. Slamming the door shut with her telekinesis, Rarity breathed a sigh of relief.
Oh, well, at least
The ground shook as something large, heavy, and fast slammed into the side of the building. Luckily for Rarity, Carousel Boutique was an experimental building when it was built, years before her family moved into town from Minneapolis. It was designed to be an extremely sturdy building, able to withstand great abuse from the elements. Right now, it was demonstrating its hidden powers by resisting every attack Severus made against it. But there was no telling if it would eventually give in to the assault.
Oh, what are we going to do? The beast is going to destroy Boutique because we've angered it somehow.
Well, Rarity, her dramatics a little more than justified than usual in the face of losing her house.
Maybe the others can help?
Suggested Pinky, referring to the rest of the main six.
No, that won't work. Twilight and Fluttershy won't ever make it back in time to help. I met Applejack and Rainbow Dash, silly. I'm sure they can do something at least buy some time until the other two come back. I guess we don't have much of a choice, but how are you?
Wait right there, ordered Pinky, before rushing over to a window, opening it and diving into the outside through it. It happened to be a back window, one that Severus wasn't paying attention to, so she was able to make her escape to seek help for Rarity. Rainbow Dash was lounging around on her bed, reading some new action thriller novel Twilight had recently finished and recommended. As usual, the intelligent unicorn had been right, and Rainbow found herself really liking Razorblade Angel. Well, most of it anyway. The only major problem she had with the book was that it involved the presence of the most obscene monsters that had ever been considered. Giant mutant hornets who were all endowed with bull-sized...
Rainbow! Rainbow!
cried the unmistakable voice of Pinky. Outside her cloud house's door? Normally, Rainbow would have rolled her eyes and enthusiastically gone to answer the door. However, the tone and urgency in Pinky was clear, which meant something bad had happened. Thus, Rainbow rushed down to her front door to find Pinky standing on the other side, on the clouds.
Pinky, what's keeping you on the clouds?
Asked Rainbow, concerned about Pinky's defying laws of physics and magic combined.
No time to explain. Severus is back, and he's going after Rarity for some reason. Twilight and Fluttershy are out of town, so it's up to us to save her.
Rainbow just gave a quick nod and immediately shot off into the sky, heading for Carousel Boutique. She didn't know how Pinky had gotten up to the cloud house, as Twilight's old balloon was nowhere in sight, and then how Pinky would get down, but that wasn't important. Plus, since it was Pinkie Pie, the explanation probably would make the situation even less sense. Applejack surveyed the part of the town currently known as the nursery. It was where the apple tree sprouts were being grown into places where most of the old trees had died and stopped producing. Those expired trees were replaced with saplings. Then, after being cut down and processed on site into useful lumber boards, since the farm was quite large and there was always a ready supply of old trees to harvest, the surplus of lumber was the secret reason why the Apple family barn had managed to keep getting destroyed almost every year without in turn bankrupting the family. As outside of paint and metal, the rest of the necessary materials were already in storage. But that wasn't really what Applejack was thinking about. Within her head, she was at war with herself on deciding a time to reveal her secret to her friends. And then her family would be an even bigger problem. Because while her friends were effectively as close as blood relatives at this point, they at least didn't live in the same building as her. Plus, She had suspected that Big Mac might have had some suspicions about her, due to his odd reactions to her slightly unusual behaviors before the first transformation. Does he know something I don't? Wondered Applejack, questioning if her family had buried secrets that, for whatever reason, were being kept for her. It sort of made sense. Big Mac was the only male presence on the farm, and had been in charge of running it alongside Granny ever since Appleseed and Cornflower had died of pneumonia. Or did they? That chilling thought caused Applejack's eyes to widen in shock. Pieces of information that were formerly unrelated began to connect like puzzle pieces. It wasn't much, since her parents had died so long ago, and she had been barely even school-age at the time. But now, from the perspective of a grown mare, the truth began to unfold. Mom's cutie mark. It was fading like mine before she passed. Parted the pony, as he absentmindedly glanced back at her own marked flank. Despite what Twilight had said, the condition seemed to have only worsened once the bright red was now shifted into a reddish orange, almost as if her cutie mark was a branding from a hot iron instead of being a purely natural thing. How no pony else, not even her own family, had noticed since Twilight first pointed it out was beyond her. But even if worse considerations would need to be made about wearing some kind of covering to hide it. She knew there was a more to connection between what had happened to her mother and the issues she herself was having, but it was interrupted by one of the apple collection buckets suddenly exploding, apples flying everywhere. "What, tarnation!" exclaimed AJ.
Sorry!
Replied the head of Pinky, which stuck out from the still half-full bucket.
No time to explain. Rarity's in trouble and needs our help.
"What kind of trouble?" inquired AJ, long since used to having Pinky appear in places in ways that shouldn't be possible. She was also well used to Rarity, considering the most minor of problems, such as one of her fake eyelashes going missing, as a natural emergency.
She's stuck in our house while being attacked by Cerberus, and no, we don't know why either.
Cerberus, are you sure?
I had to carry Rarity on my back while we were running here, so I'm super duper upper, sir!
Guess I'll have to deal with breaking the bad news to them later. No point when all of them, one of them is dead, thought Applejack. Alright, I'll be on my way once I get my lasso.
Hurry!
Cried Pinky, sinking back into the bucket as it trapped in a bottomless pit of apples. Applejack paid no attention as he raced to the barn, grabbing her trusty rope. She didn't know if it was strong enough to handle a three-headed mastiff, but it was the best she had, and if that failed, Applejack shook her head before rushing to Rarity's rescue, rope in mouth. I will not go that far, not unless it's absolutely necessary. At that same moment, Celestia was holding day court, listening to a representative from some group of activist ponies go on and on about some reforms that need to be made. She was pretty sure it involved a recent hike in how much the upper class was being taxed, but she really just lost interest and didn't bother. Almost everything that was being brought directly to her attention was written exactly the same, to which she only needed to hear the elaborate, detailed conclusion to understand what her life was being wasted on. She'd become so adept over the years of developing a sense of when to tune back in. But until that time was necessary, she actually liked these periods of giving ponies a warm, seemingly caring smile, while simultaneously imagining weird things happening to the current speaker in her head. Right now, she was imagining an entire contingent of creatures that resembled bipedal monkeys who were experts in space-set battles, aiming a gigantic railgun at the droning pony holding the floor and preparing to fire a single sand grain at sufficient velocity that would deliver the force of an orbital rain nuke into the brain of the boring stallion before her. For all that she was the epitome of a wise and kind leader, Celestia had never been above imagining how to kill her subjects in increasingly horrifying and complex ways for her own enjoyment. Regrettably, she could sense the still very alive speaker reaching the apex, so now she had to reject her reality and substitute the one she was part of. However, right as he was about to go into his conclusion, a Royal Guards pony broke into the guest room. Your boss say, your presence is needed at the castle.
Oh, thank me,
thought Celestia.
I would seriously prefer a short war over having to listen to rich plot holes complain about a 1% tax exclusive to them.
But she still has a royal duty to do.
Due to the solar occurrence, day court has been cancelled for the rest of the afternoon,
announced Celestia, before proceeding to rise from the throne and follow the guards pony out the room so fast that there wasn't any time for the petitioners and representatives to realize they had to wait another day to complain to the Sun Princess. Celestia, on the other hand, was absolutely delighted.
Thank you, Angel Star. I don't know how much longer I would have to last in there.
Well, I can only imagine it wasn't for much longer, Your Highness. You may wish you were back after there. You see what's going on, however. That brought Celestia's elation coming crashing back down to Earth. Angel Star was one of the veterans of the Royal Guard, and one of the few who preferred to remain in their natural form, instead of the sky spell, which made all guard ponies look exactly the same, regardless of gender. She had been the heart of the Tinsley invasion a few months back, and many border conflicts years before. If something was troubling her about the situation at hand, it couldn't be good. Luna was already at the garrison with about half a dozen high-ranking officers. It was still taking Celestia a while to get used to not having shining armor around. He had been honorably discharged as captain, so he could take up the role of Prince Consort next to his wife, Princess Cadence, back in the Crystal Empire.
Oh, I don't get to do a shining armor voice.
In his place now was Captain Stonewall, a very gruff but able soldier, who managed to get the guard back in shape after a humiliating failure of daring to deal with Chrysalis' forces.
What's going on?
Asked Celestia as he entered her room, assuming the behavior of a concerned Astral leader. Angel Star followed behind, locking the door so no eavesdroppers could listen to. It's about that guard's pony. That guard dog, Severus, Your Majesty. Entered Stonewall, clearly concerned with the sudden added weight of responsibility. The guard's official that's in charge of Tara's prison facility says he does something thankless.
Is that prison still secure?
Thankfully it is. The Division Titan security was that much disappeared, but it's strained their numbers. It's hard enough to get troops down there, pushing them past our limits with inevitability.
We are well aware of the consequences, Captain,
interrupted Luna, cutting out Stonewall before he went into detail about what would happen if there was a jailbreak at Tartarus.
However, there some similar incident not too long where Severus had only gone to a nearby town for some reason and was later returned without incident.
Well, not completely without incident. You see, there's this strange four-legged monkey thing, I think he's called a centaur, named Tyrek, that might have escaped.
What was that?
Nothing! I didn't say Tyrek escaped! Nope, not at all. Yes, but from the reports my predecessor filed on the previous matter, the incident was just Severus following his natural instincts. If he's got three heads, you can't keep a dog chained up without him wanting to break free and push his boundaries. He was also returned to without problem by your protege, Princess Celestia, so no lasting damage was done. Celestia caught in the implication in the captain's voice that there was a clear difference between then and now.
How's this situation different?
Well, last time Tyrek escaped.
What?
Nothing. This time, I think Gromnar and Erebus might have left. The concern was clear in Stonewall's face. This time, Your Highness, some of the guards and even some of the inmates claim to have seen something vaguely resembling a pony prowling around and trying to get Severus' attention. Luna was taken aback at the idea of some of the information that had come from those present in Tartarus itself.
Why did the prisoners give such information freely? Certainly, there was an idea that some pony agreed to that would benefit those evils.
You won't believe this, Princess, but from what I was told, the inmates exchanged information only on the grounds that the guards do everything in their power to keep this particular pony as far away from them as possible. They may be unwilling captives in any other situation, but the mere mention of the strangest detail about our mystery pony sent them into near hysterics and pleading not to be punished by, and I quote, kicking us out to fend off the darkest of equestrian shadows. No idea what that could mean.
So Tyrek...
No!
Celestia, however, did. There was only one pony she knew of who could scare even the worst criminals within the country. But if what she had suspected was true, then it could develop into a PR nightmare for the Crown at best. She really did not want to consider the worst-case scenario. Tell me, Captain, what was the most unusual detail given to describe this visitor?
Stonewall reached behind to scratch his neck. Funny you should ask that. Every pony almost universally mentioned he looked far hairier than the usual pony. Almost as if he was part pony, hairy monster, some statements claim.
For the briefest moment, the Princess of the Sun felt lightheaded. Practically everything had pieced together just as they began to fall apart. There might still be time, though. Captain, ordered Celestia, what about this gets out to no pony, especially not anything about the hairy visitor, who is supposedly responsible for Severus disappearing again.
All communication for Tartarus is to be followed directly through Canterlot and not be seen any pony below sufficient rank to see top secret information. If you have guards looking for Cerberus, keep them on the trail. However, should they come across anything resembling a hairy half-pony, they are not to engage and get the buck out of there. Am I clear?
Yes, Your Majesty.
Saluted Stonewall. He then turned and barked out orders of his own. Startling, the only two figures left in the garrison were the princesses.
What was all that about?
Asked Luna, not quite sure what Celestia was so worried about.
How could I have been so blind? The guards were all there.
Celestia! Shouted Luna in the royal Canterlot voice, forcing Celestia to snap back reality. What is going on?
He's back, Luna,
answered Celestia in a voice that rivaled Fluttershy for being the quietest, audible expression of words.
The ancient devil who had long sought to overthrow us since practically the day we ascended the throne is again at large.
Who, Celestia? Who could be almost as old as us and still think they could overthrow the twin monarchy of Equestria? Celestia looked into Luna's eyes, her own pinkish purple irises conveying a feeling of worry that she hadn't felt in over a decade, before uttering a name that told Luna how bad the situation had gotten.
Sable Loam.
As Applejack smashed through the one remaining windows in the Carousel Boutique, she had to admit the situation was rapidly becoming impossible. She arrived at the scene last, with Rainbow trying to conjure up various weather storms that would force the Cerberus to leave while not harming Rarity's home. However, that only made him angrier. Applejack then tried her luck, employing her rodeo skills to try and lassoing one of the three heads and tying the creature up. In return, she felt the business end of a swinging paw and was now resting in an Applejack indent on the wall. As he fell out of her hole and tried to make spinning ducks go away, she could hear Rainbow try and just ramming the creature, possibly trying to intimidate it.
You like hanging ponies, do you? Well, let's see how much you like it!
The sound of Rainbow accelerating was broken off immediately by the noise of the three dog heads barking simultaneously, as if shouting a spell in some obscure dragon tongue. The result of that was Rainbow crashing through a wall and making a similar indent right next to the Applejack one. Pinkie, for her part, was trying to do her best to keep Rarity calm, while the fashionista was trying not to go crazy at the destruction of her house. In her opinion, there were enough Rainbow Dash-shaped holes in the roof that had been fixed to last a lifetime.
I can't wait for Twilight and Rainbow to come back from wherever they are. That dog is going to kill us before then by knocking this place down! Oh, it's no use! It's no use!
Well, Rarity, being as unhelpful as the other three ponies expected at this point.
Well, something had to draw Cerberus to Rarity. What was he doing right before he jumped her?
Pinkie spoke up then, to cut off more of Rarity's whining.
I'm not whining. I'm complaining. Verity and I had just gone shopping for some more materials for the boutique, but she got blindsided by some other pony. The other guy seemed to drop some sack, but he didn't come to pick it up. Then one of the fabric bolts Rarity bought came loose and covered both her and the sack up. After saving her from the falling paw of Cerberus, we made up a plan that managed to get her, all of her stuff, and me safely in here.
Another small earthquake, and a shower of ceiling plaster prompted her to add,
although this place might not be so safe right now.
Wait, you had Rarity pick up all of her things, right?
Yeah.
Did she pick up the other pony's bag as well? Rarity managed to stop wailing and say,
Well, I guess. It might have been wrapped up in that Butsietta boat that fell on me. Oh, I should never have gotten it. All I wanted to do was make a nice jacket for her.
AJ was outright ignoring Rarity at that point, as he walked over to the bolt of burnt sienna fabric. It clearly needed a wash due to its early damage, but there was an odd lump sticking out. And to wrest to get to the boutique, it would have been easy to miss. Taking the bolt, Applejack immediately rolled it down to the ground. The moment the sack wasn't entangled in fabric, the answer to their problem was revealed.
Oh, man, what is that smell?
Complained Rainbow Dash.
Is that some kind of dog pheromone or something?
It's not. Trust me, I'll lie it. Curtly answered Applejack, not wanting to actually explain why she knew it wasn't pheromones. What was in the sack, however, was a collection of bones clearly taken from the garbage bin behind the meadery.
I know what's going on here,
announced Applejack to the other three ponies.
Then what are you waiting for? Tell us so we can save my house!
replied the distraught Rarity. Severus out there must have thought you looked like a pile of delicious meat. Since being draped with his cloth, you may have looked like some kind of meat dish. The fact those bones are from the meteorite imply, however, that whoever it was that bumped into you did this intentionally, and originally had led Severus here in the first place with the smell of meat. The other ponies looked at each other, then back at Applejack. That explanation did make sense, although Applejack's information on how Severus worked was a little suspect, but that would have to be asked later. Right now, the problem with saving Carousel Boutique was kept shaking due to Severus simply trying to tear the place open like a can to get inside of it. So I could guess the way we get Severus out of here is one of us take the sack of bones there and leads him away? I could do that. It's pretty easy, suggested Rainbow. No, you can't. Why not? We both know that I'm the fastest flyer in town. I can get him away from here in no time. The trick isn't going to be speed. The bones do have to be carried away fast enough to lead him away, but not so fast he loses the scent. That's what he's after here.
But if you don't want Rainbow to do it, who will? I can't outrun him. Rarity here certainly can, and we all know while you're fast, you can't outrun a dog that size,
reasoned Pinky, fearing her farmer friend might be trying to run a suicide mission. I know I can keep my pace above his. Don't worry about me. I should handle this. After all, I have a pretty good feeling I know what's going through his mind.
No!
Rarity shouted, switching from tragic figure to concerned friend.
I cannot allow you to so recklessly throw your life away simply to save my shop. You can be rebuilt, and if this does end in its destruction, but the important thing is we get rid of the bones so that Stents will attack Severus and he'll just go away.
It's not that simple, Rarity. You wrapped a cloth around those bones, so until you wash that entire bowl, it's going to smell like me as well. Rainbow narrowed her eyes. Her friend was actually acting strangely all of a sudden. She wasn't lying, but that was for sure. But lying wasn't the same as withholding the truth. Applejack, she asked cautiously, what's going on? You seem to know a lot more about this situation than one would expect, but not explaining why. Care to elaborate? Rainbow expected Applejack's famous liar face to make an appearance. Instead, Applejack just looked at her three friends in turn with an expression that made it clear whatever was about to be said was taking a lot of effort to do so. Fine, I'll come clean. I've been meaning to tell you all of you, including Twilight at first, but there was never a good time. But y'all have to let me handle this the way I want to in return, alright? Rarity and Rainbow nodded, whereas Pinky was about to nod before experiencing a final center.
Uh-oh,
thought Pinky, realizing what was about to be revealed was an extreme doozy. Applejack took one last look at her friends, hoping beyond hope she wasn't about to make a big mistake. Then she closed her eyes and allowed her friends to see the reason for her strange accent for over the past few months. At this point, the transformation was painless, but to her friends it must have looked like a horrific in the few seconds the process took. When the emerald eyes reopened, the sight was less than what the werewolf had expected. Rarity, of course, flat out fainted. Pinky and Rainbow, on the other hand, were trembling and clutching each other, as if trying to see which pony could squeeze the other higher.
Applejack, is that?
Began Rainbow, trying to comprehend what had happened. Within moments, she just watched one of her closest friends turn from a strong, hard-working earth pony into something much more resembling that of a wolf. Paws, longer fur, and mane hair, slightly different muzzle, even a wet, black nose tip. The only details implying that this was still in fact Applejack was the splotches of what had been three apple trio cutie mark on the creature's flank, the orange coat, the yellow loosely bound mane and tail, and a pair of green eyes that were unmistakably those of the farmers. Yeah, well, I guess you can't say I've been too honest with y'all about this, huh? The Applejack wolf said, in Applejack's voice, slightly huskier. Rainbow was about to launch into a tirade of questions, but was silenced by Applejack raising a hoof. Or was it a paw now? I said I'll show you this only if you let me do what I need to do. I'll explain later, I promise! Without another word, the pony wolf picked up the bone sack and left through one of the broken windows, rushing to it and taking care not to hit any of the broken glass. Rainbow, Pinky, saw the form of their transformed friend easily led the erased Cerberus away from the broken carousel and into Everfree. Behind them, Rarity came true.
Oh, what a strange and silly dream. Between Pinkie doing impossible things, being attacked by a separatist, and then Applejack revealing to herself to be a werewolf of all things.
She then realized the state of her home was now in.
Wait, that actually happened, didn't it? All of it. Even that last bit?
Rainbow and Pinkie could only nod solemnly. The Pinkie said had been right. There had been in fact a very big doozy. Something beyond expectations. If only it hadn't hit so close to their hearts.